hello, everybody. We're doing something a little different here. Usually, Bekruz Hamzayev will be conducting the interviews from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, but I'm Daniel Zaretsky here in New York, writing out the coronavirus. Bekruz had an urgent meeting. So, as you know, we are doing the World Virtual Coronavirus Conference. And this is powered by the World Influencers Network, WIN. And we're here to continue talking to experts and people from around the world about what they're doing and how their work has been affected by the COVID crisis, and what they see are future trends happening in their field and in other areas, if they'd like to comment about that. So I'd like to introduce Evin Schwartz, who we've known for a few years already. And I won't put any words on his mouth. Evin, hello, and thank you for the short notice and the change of host and everything, but we know each other, so why don't you start out, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about first your background, and then we'll get to the rest of it.
Yeah, hey Daniel, and pleasure to be here. I appreciate that. Everyone's hunkered down right now, and I know it's a difficult time, so any way to talk and share the information is helpful. So a little bit of introduction. I'm the CEO and founder here at Belouga. Belouga is an online learning platform for teachers and students in primary and secondary to connect, communicate, and collaborate with their peers around the world. So we've been in market now for about 3 years. We're active in about 98 countries worldwide. So online learning and remote learning is really kind of our bread and butter always. So you can imagine how crazy our team has been over here over the last few months, really. But looking at it, what we've really seen, the trends happening, is coming from Asia first and then flocking into North America, right, with all these cancellations. So we've kind of been in tune with this for a few months now. It's mid-April already, but seeing how schools are adapting to closures, remote learning, and it's a large scale. I'll tell you, I'm excited to speak with you today on it, just to kind of share a little bit more info on what schools are doing right, what some schools might need to catch up on. And I think really the future of where education is going. This thing is definitely shifting the landscape completely now. I think we're in a time where it's not necessarily even online learning anymore. This is crisis learning, which is a really, really big difference, right? So any way that we could just set people up for success, understanding that life is heavy right now, right? There's a lot of things going on, not just with the virus, but just in our everyday lives as well. So health has to come first, and then understanding that next wave of how we keeping the wheels moving, even from home, where mom and dad might have to work, but their students or children at this point need to continue learning, right? What does that look like? How do we grab the attention? How do we stick to some sort of schedule as well? And what does it really look like in the future, which I think is, it's kind of undefined right now, but we're seeing a lot of trends come up.
Great. So before we get to those trends, could you sort of tell me pre-crisis how you were working, with global partners first? So let's get a sense of how you were doing that, and then we'll get to how you're working post-crisis, so maybe we can see the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, school districts are our bread and butter. So we work with districts from here in North America to all throughout Asia, throughout Europe, South America, Africa, and Australia as well. Ultimately, what our platform really touches on is content first. So we work with organizations worldwide, probably about, at this point, about 150 groups, everything from the United Nations and UNICEF, down to small mental health organizations, to grassroots organizations that are protecting the elephants. And what we really work with them on is creating educational material from their raw assets. So what are they currently doing in the field that are creating tremendous ripples, for positive change? And how do we then take those assets, so images, videos, case studies, work with educators on our side to then turn it into lesson plans for the everyday classroom? Where, for an example, how does elephants in Tanzania relate to music, earth science, art, history, science, and really just making it kind of an entry point for students to get interested in and kind of spark their curiosity and creativity. So we look at real world learning as an entry point. Once in though, and that seed has been planted in a learner and that excitement is there, how do we then kind of seamlessly integrate it into the classroom? And the really neat thing is through our platform and technology, students are not only able to consume this individually or as a classroom, but do so collaboratively. And that's really where we've seen the magic happen. So we've kind of been on this remote learning wave for quite some time now, but not necessarily from home, but traditionally from the classroom.
Right.
So we've seen a lot of that shift kind of push forward now and understand, the classroom has turned into the living room or the bedroom or the kitchen in a lot of cases.
Right.
What we've also seen is that there's a lot of organizations that can run their everyday operations now. So how are they still able to keep top of mind, which is extremely important because this thing will ride out eventually. How do we continue that learning cycle, push them forward, but continue kind of planting that seed in the next generation? And I'll tell you, probably about 98% of the organizations that we work with are NGO and nonprofit groups worldwide. So keeping them kind of active, engaged in the next generation of supporters, ideally, but doing so while still tremendously benefiting students to learn about the world with the world, and in teachers and districts to really get kind of these engaging materials and assets that they could utilize on a day-to-day basis.
It just brings up a question for me while you were talking.
Yeah.
Then, with on two fronts. First is, have you seen any issue of a sort of a digital divide? First, within the U.S., let's say, or within, I'm thinking you work all over the world, but obviously both of us are in New York, so the U.S. is going to be one of your primary um, areas. Do you see digital divide even within a school, between some people who can access the internet and this and who can, or between school districts based on what region they're in? And I'm curious, since I work primarily in Central Asia, which is considered a developing, this developing. Those terms are kind of, but for the sake of what most people understand. So, do you see, what problems are you even seeing with developing countries, their lack of internet there, especially perhaps, I'm not saying they're completely like, they have internet, but it's even less evenly distributed than, say, even in the US, where we're having some issues with it, apparently, especially in rural areas, in other areas. And so if you could just comment on these issues.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Daniel. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that we realize, and there is definitely a gap. I mean, that's real, and it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in. There's an absolute gap. One of the biggest things that we saw, actually, which really put into perspective right out of the gate, was how many students in the U.S. rely on school meals for their breakfast and lunch. And that's where things really start dividing. There's about 22 million students in the U.S. that rely on school for 2 meals a day.
That's a lot.
It's absolutely tremendous, right? So that was the first gap, I think, that schools had to get over first, was how are we going to feed our kids, right? Listen, I'm CEO of a tech company. There is nothing more important than feeding the kids, right? Like, technology comes second.
Right.
So that was handled fantastically. And I think, and really in every single district. So you start thinking about the positive side of this is, what can we do as a collective society, if we really put our minds to it? And I think that's the silver lining of this entire pandemic, is people coming together and really connecting and caring about one another. On the other end of it, once that wave was accomplished, and it's still going on, there's no doubt about it, there's challenges, and superintendents and principals are rising to the occasion, teachers are rising to the occasion, and then some. But looking at it from that tech divide, I'll tell you, what we've seen is everyone's doing what they can. And I think that's really where it should lie. Testing, I mean, I am not a fan of testing whatsoever.
Right.
I'll go on record for that every day of the week. I just think we are living in such a different time when probably we were in school, where testing is not the key asset anymore, right? It's how we expanding and setting students up for success by sparking their passions and inspiring, guiding them towards that next level. So I think that tech divide really comes in. I'll tell you, there's been some issues where I've spoken with teachers. I mean, we have our own proprietary technology from the ground up. So our platform, our messaging, our video chat, and there's teachers in our platform and some of the big boy platforms too, Google, Zoom, Skype, that they're organizing live sessions with their students, 17 kids in a class, and 3 of them are showing up, right?
Yeah, I've heard of that too. Yes, right.
So I
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
no, and I think that's a sign of multiple things, right? So it's obviously preparation, and it's not necessarily on the teacher side at all, right? The teachers are doing as best as they
Right.
possibly can with this. It's understanding, are we giving students access? Do we even know what our students' access is? We work with a great district down in Kentucky, here in the States, where they're supplying every single child with a Chromebook. And, that it's about 100,000 students in the
Wow.
district. So, some schools are making a real large step here. I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I've seen to be a real success with schools, especially with lack of technology, is setting up about 2 virtual meetings a week between teacher and students. So Monday and Friday, 30 minutes in complete open forum. Let's ask questions, and then serving them up with 1 assignment a week, right? Not overwhelming.
Right.
And if they could nail it, fantastic,
Right.
right? What we've seen is obviously a lot of mobile usage, just based on not everyone has a laptop or a desktop at home. Not everyone's Wi-Fi is reliable as well. I'll tell you, in emerging markets around the world, and
Right.
emerging markets, I'll even tell you, there's pockets in the U.S. that are emerging markets.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
No doubt about it. It's a struggle for sure. What we've seen is a lot of schools are actually going old school a little bit and sending packets, like physical paper, for the students, which I think is great, right? Like, any way to continue this cycle. I think the scary part is no one knows when or what this looks like in the future.
Right.
So understanding, like, hey, there's spring break for kids, which is nice, and everyone's a week of mental health, which is really, really important, and we are stressing that as much as possible, especially leading into May with Mental Health Awareness Month. We'll have a lot of different programs going on, but it's okay to step away from the screen for a little bit here, and any way that we're able to continue learning is fantastic. We've seen, in Africa specifically, in Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya, we've seen amazing educators that are utilizing literally 1 device with about 80 students in 1 school setting. Granted, these are regions that the outbreak has not happened yet.
Understood.
So I'm curious to kind of see what that learning looks like at the second wave. But one of the things that we've seen as well is that everyone has turned into a content creator and an educator. And that's really what we've kind of prided ourselves on our entire time here at Belouga, is kind of making education accessible, impactful, and equitable. And doing so, mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, whoever you're at home with has something to offer. So we've seen a lot of great educational skills just pushed down in the home setting, where the parents are turning into the homeschool teachers, whether they meant to be or not. So I think there's a lot of different ways that students can continue learning, not only locally, but overseas as well.
Great. Well, that's a great answer. What I was trying to get at the last question was, yes, it's not just the digital divide within the U.S., and we have emerging market pockets certainly within the U.S., but also in a developing country, let's say, perhaps the school, and this may be the case in these developing areas of the U.S. too, has a good Wi-Fi, but then it's the last mile. If the kids aren't coming to the school, how are you catching that last mile when they're at their home, let's say in a rural area, in an inner city, whether it's here in the U.S., whether it's especially in emerging markets, that last mile where maybe the school could have a good connection, but you understand what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I'll tell you, I was on a conversation last week with someone in Colorado here in the U.S., and there's a lot of regions throughout that entire state that are extremely remote.
Really?
Where the technology hits, not as strong as it might be in Denver or Fort Collins, those major cities. What we've seen, which is super interesting, is that they're creating mobile hotspots. So the school might send out, literally, this is how it happened, buses. So they're utilizing their buses. They're either driving them around certain regions, literally for a day, or they're parking them within certain areas that they know are densely populated with students, and just looking at their map and regions. And those are just things that are super innovative. I think these are times where, you look at what a school district can do, especially with limited budget and resources. I think that's a fantastic solution, are these limited hotspots. I think the printouts are kind of the last result, to be honest. But as long as the student is continuing to learn, and it's not about the grade at all. Right. Honestly, like, if the student, in my opinion at least, if the student doesn't send that work back, not a problem at all. Right. Like, their job is to just prepare them with resources that if they're mentally and physically able to continue learning, continue learning.
Right.
But I'll tell you, this is, I think, where private and public sector really come into play together. And we've seen some great opportunities with that as well, where, there's organizations that are stepping up to the plate and saying, we have the resources, whether it be financial or from a tech perspective, that they're able to work with organizations, help support them through this time. And that's really what it's about, right? So if a region, Facebook is doing some good things. AWS has been doing some great things. We work directly with those guys, but providing solutions to the mom and pop shops or to just mom and pop in general, right, to help the process move forward. So I think that's really where private sector steps up and provides a lot of different resources and support.
So that's great. And can you tell me then, if there's something you haven't mentioned, other trends or general trends that you have seen, and what you think are the implications for the future and how this will change in general, and also the way that you do business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that we're seeing is on the event side.
Mm-hmm.
So physical events, workshops, team meetings, I think people are going to second guess how quickly they're getting back into a room with 10 people, right? Forget about 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 with some of these big conferences that we've seen previously. And I think one of the biggest things, especially with the trend, is what we're trying to do is how we creating entry points, but then tailing it completely, right? So if Daniel and Evin are speaking on Monday morning in New York, April 13th, right, what happens next year, right? We just had this great meeting and physically we can't be there, but how do we replicate that physical process digitally and do so where it doesn't have to be just, over Zoom or sending an email. It's a full process and experience that I think is coming out of this. And that's one of the big terms that we're seeing is, what does the experience of learning look like? And, what does social learning look like? To be honest with you, I mean, school everywhere pretty much here in the States is done for the year.
Mm-hmm.
We work with schools in China that are actually hinting at coming back in May, which is extremely interesting. I mean, listen, those guys have been in the ringer for about 6 months now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not there yet in North America, and especially here, the eye of the storm on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one of the big things is looking at, what happens if this goes into the fall term, right? Like, how do we continue this process? So we're seeing a lot of schools that are in preparation for that already. We're working with a few different schools in the DC, Maryland region actually right now that were extremely prepared for this. And this is something that I think a lot of schools need to start linking into is before Corona hit, years before, what this school had in place was every single teacher had to upload one of their lessons to a cloud software. And it's not necessarily even just visually seeing each other, but in that oh shoot moment, when everything hits the fan, what can we do to continue this learning process? And to be honest with you, I was shocked when I heard that school has not missed a beat. They're still moving forward with testing this year. They're still moving forward with digital graduation and pushing those students through. I think the big thing and really the trend that I would like to see come out of this is that we're not so keen on the traditional educational process anymore, that we're understanding that, listen, everyone is able to get by. And what does that look like? We don't know yet, right? So we can't hang a hat on saying if a child's reading level is at 3rd grade and they miss 3 months of school, are they prepared for 4th grade? We just don't know it yet.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things that we need to get to here, but understanding that school doesn't have to be so black and white anymore.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah.
Do you see, one thing I was thinking of is that, school tends to be a one size fits all for everyone. So you go through, you all take the same classes, you all do the same stuff. Do you see that if more of this moves online, there'll be more time for maybe individual plans for students? So, for instance, student A maybe doesn't have to march in lobstick and take the same classes as B in this grade and that grade and these predetermined paths or something, and they can maybe work more on other things that are interesting to them, or how do you see some of that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I'll tell you, our team has been keen on artificial intelligence for quite some time now. And I think that's the big factor, physically in a room. I don't care if a classroom is 5 kids or 25 kids or 50 kids, it's very difficult to provide a personalized experience to every single child. Understanding their age level, their reading, their interests, And then what's mandated, right? There still is, as much as I might say we don't love testing, there still is that need to understand comprehension.
Right.
But from a tech perspective, we now have the benefit to kind of test a few things out here. Right? Like I read this great article yesterday called The Great Pause. And this is really what it is. There's this great pause where we have a second to take a step back and understand, how do we get better, right? How do we get better as a society, physically, mentally, educationally? So I think what we're able to see now, and really what our team is working on currently as well, is how we creating, again, that pathway for a child. So understanding their interest, where Daniel might be interested in New York and Evan might be interested in elephants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Completely different things, but they both touch on math class.
Right.
So how are we able to integrate those touch points to an individual learner? And it has to be done through technology.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just, last question or two here. You mentioned something. When this first started, I was thinking all the trends, all the things that may change. And a lot of people have mentioned a lot of the trends already. So I'm not going to come up with something that's going to sound so original, let's say, but people have mentioned, but one of the things you mentioned, the mental health. So I don't know if you just want to talk about this, but I was just thinking that this must be causing tremendous mental health issues. And one of the things I was thinking of is people maybe not, I think this is going to cause a lot of addictions and obsessive compulsive disorders and so on. I'm not talking about addictions to drugs or addictions. I'm talking about addictions to tech, addictions to, some of these things may have already society had some of these issues, but, I'll give you an example, binge watching. One of the things that I'm trying not to do is to do that, because I know myself, if a series is 2 or 3 videos, okay, but if a series is 80 videos and I get into the first 2 or 3, I'm going to feel this need that I have to watch all of them. And then if you multiply it by 5 or 6 series, that's 500 videos. And maybe it sounds stupid, but I'm afraid that maybe I'm going to get, addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm making sure these long series right now, and I'm not saying everybody's gonna be like that. I'm not saying I would get addicted, but I just I don't even want to take a chance. You understand? So, and you multiply it by loads of other things. So, if you want, it's just something there. If you want to talk about the mental health about it, since you mentioned Mental Health Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think, listen, everyone's going through something right now, right? There's different extremes of it. Mental health is the foundation of everything that we do over here. So we work with some fantastic partners around the world. There's a great organization right here in our own backyard called Same Here. Really, really incredible group. Their founder, Eric, has just done amazing things with mental health, both from his own personal experiences and now has translated that into professions, industries, and education. So we've kind of been on this mental health kick for quite some time, looking at it that none of the other subject areas matter without proper mental health, right? Mental health is the plate.
100%.
Yeah. So everyone,
foundation of everything. Without mental health, there's nothing else.
You nailed it. So, and that's the biggest thing, right? Is everyone's so focused on, there's so much on the plate.
Right.
For everyone, the plate is mental health though. So without that one foundation, there is nothing else. What I will say is, you look at, unfortunately, just the home situation on a lot of people, right? And some are in single family households. Right. Some are living with grandparents. Some are living in abusive households.
Right.
So having to be quarantined in that situation, even in a nice white picket fence household, one of those, right? Like there's going to be problems, and there's going to be PTSD in some way, shape, or form with a lot of different people. We're seeing it already. I think these mental health organizations are stepping up to the plate and then some, to use that term again. But understanding that everyone is going through something, and we have to be open to talking about this. Right? That's the biggest thing, is that the last few months have not been, normal, right? What we call normal.
Right.
It's the furthest thing possible. So with that in mind, no one has seen this before. The world has not been through this, at least in our time on this planet. So how do we provide an experience and support to students, teachers, administrators, parents, grandparents, young kids as well? And I think that's really where we come together as a society. So there will absolutely be an uptick, I personally believe, unfortunately, in cases, but those cases shouldn't be looked at as a 1 out of 5 problem, which is traditionally the statistic with mental health is mental health affects 1 out of 5 of us. That means 20% of the market is sick and 80% are perfectly fine.
Which is not true.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Mental health is a 5 out of 5 problem.
I agree.
No matter what. Everyone is dealing with something, and if you're not dealing with it at that moment, one of your friends, family, coworkers is, right? Which affects everyone. So I think mental health, like we have to prioritize this. I think there's going to be some government programs that pop up, I hope, that support this in the next wave as we go through these kind of ups and downs here. But I'll tell you, it's just about starting the conversation first. And, the word stigma needs to leave. Like, let's not put that word anywhere near mental health anymore, right? This has to be part of everyday conversation where, if everyone goes back to school and some kid has a broken leg, well, everyone knows that kid has a broken leg.
Right.
There's going to be kids that walk into school for the first time, hopefully over the upcoming months, that you'll have no idea what they went through.
Right.
And they'll be there with their backpack, a nice outfit on, and like ready to learn. But what happened over the past 6 months when they were home? And I think that's where we really need to start a conversation and understand that this is going to be a transition, and it's not going to happen overnight. This is changed, right? No doubt about that. So I think on the mental health side, it's extremely important to highlight organizations that are doing great work and understand that this is not something that needs to be stigmatized anymore.
Great. So I think this has been excellent. Thank you. And I think we will start to wrap it up. Is there anything else that I didn't touch on that you would like to add, or pretty much you've hit everything, and maybe you'll just tell us how to get in contact with you, your website, so people can find out more. So
yeah, absolutely. And Daniel, this was fantastic. I really appreciate the time this morning. You could find us at belouga.org, belouga.org. We're on Twitter, belouga._. You could find me at Evin Schwartz at Twitter. And we're pretty active, right? The good thing about this is no one's going anywhere, right? So everyone's around 24/7 these days.
Right.
So we try to make ourselves as accessible as possible, working with a lot of new organizations, a lot of new schools to understand how we filter knowledge down to that next generation of learner. And more than happy to have conversations or help support the network in any way we can.
Great, Evan. Well, again, thanks very much for being a sport here. I think we had some changes in time. We had changes in host and so on. So my phone was down. But this has been great. And thanks again. These videos will be posted shortly. So I guess the team will reach out to you when the video is posted. You've been in touch with the team. And we'll go from there, and we'll see what happens. We're hoping to draw lessons learned from what you and our other experts have said, and we hope to continue that this will be a continuous process as well, and we'll be running more of these conferences, virtual conferences, as we go on as well. So thanks again. Have a good day. I know it's a rainy day today here in New York, and let's all hope for the best, and thanks again.
Thanks, Daniel. Stay well.
Great. Thank you. See you.
Bye.